We're at the halfway point of the 2020s, and so far this has not proven to be the best decade for horror, which is a shame because that's usually what I cover on this channel. Still, we have had some good ones, and I thought I'd go over 15 of them today. We'll start with number 15, which is The Substance. This is a very in-your-face body horror film that tackles the subject of body modification. The concept is that there's this substance you can take that will create a second, younger, better version of yourself. And this, of course, will appeal to people who are aging and who are insecure about that fact. But of course, because nothing in life is free, there are lots of catches and special rules involved that will inevitably lead to catastrophe. This movie isn't exactly concerned with things like subtlety and realism. The message is delivered with a very heavy hand, and the entire world that this movie takes place in feels very surreal and bizarre and not like the world that we live in. But Coralie Fargeat is such a deliberate filmmaker that even those choices feel intentional and significant. If you want a subtle film, this isn't going to be the one for you. But if you want a good body horror film with some great prosthetic work and a pretty solid story, then check this one out. At number 14 is Late Night with the Devil. This is a found footage type film that takes on the world of late night TV hosts. The whole thing is presented as a taping of the final episode of a fictional TV series called Night Owls. David Dastmalchian plays a somewhat stereotypical late night host who decides to bring on some questionable guests in order to gain relevancy. And as the night starts to wear on, things start to take a turn for the sinister. The environment in this film is so lovingly crafted. You can tell that this director has a real affection for the late night medium, and that comes through in just the set designs and the camera movements and the way everything is set up. The story is also pretty solid. It's got some tasteful touches of Rosemary's Baby in there and whatnot. Overall, this is a pretty solid film that I liked quite a bit. At number 13 is Talk to Me. And A24 are known for doing very artsy and out there type of horror films. So the real surprise with this one was just how normal and straightforward it is. It takes a very tired formula and finds a way to breathe new life into it, where basically you have these teenagers who decide to play this supernatural party game. And of course, things go terribly wrong and they basically get affected by a curse. I think there's a couple reasons why this movie works when so many others like it fail. For starters, there is just the gimmick of the hand, which is one of the best horror props that we've seen in recent years. It's such an interesting way to bring this concept of, communing with the dead to the screen in a very visual and tangible way, and I love that. And then the second thing is just the depth that's given to the characters, where I'm never rooting against these characters. I'm never wanting them to die the way that a lot of really crappy movies in this vein try to get you to do. And because of that, this is actually a compelling film. At number 12 is Speak No Evil. And here I'm talking about the original, not the stupid American remake, which I absolutely refuse to even watch. But this movie is a very disturbing cautionary tale about the dangers of taking politeness too far and not speaking up for yourself. The crazy thing with this one is that for most of the runtime, it's not even a horror film. It's just basically a character drama about these two families meeting up for a vacation. And sure, there's elements that are ominous and kind of build this sense of dread, and there's a lot of uncomfortable social tension scenes, but the true blue horror elements don't come in until right at the end, and when they do, holy crap, they go extremely hard. This one is definitely not for the faint of heart, but I think it needs to be mentioned on any list like this because it's a very powerful and thought-provoking statement in film. And yeah, I think it's one of the best horror films of this decade so far. At number 11 is Barbarian, and this one is a real roller coaster of a film. It starts off fairly simple with this woman who gets to her Airbnb and discovers that it's been double booked and there's a man already staying there. And from there, the plot just spirals out of control. This is one of those films that is truly unpredictable. and it's hard to really talk about it for long without spoiling it. So I'll just say that it's very well made on a technical level, and the story is quite satisfying by the end. It's a good one. At number 10 is Possessor, and this one proves that Brandon Cronenberg is one boundary-pushing and ambitious individual. With Possessor, he gives us a very cold, brutal, high-concept horror thriller for our era of transhumanism and techno-futurism. The movie follows a woman who works as an assassin for a mega corporation, but the catch is that instead of using her own body to commit these murders, she uses technology to basically possess the minds of other people and use their bodies to commit these murders. The woman we follow here isn't exactly someone that you'd want to root for. She's a killer who increasingly seems to enjoy the work that she's doing, and that gives the film this kind of hard, distant quality to it. But even though this character is not necessarily the most sympathetic person, the movie still finds ways to make me care about the story, and even occasionally to put me in this woman's shoes in a strange way. And because of that, the very dark places that it goes to in the end hit all that much harder. Yeah, this one's pretty creative and awesome. And at number 9, we're making a hard 180 from Possessor to The Black Phone, which is a really good movie about basically this kid who gets bullied all the time. He gets picked on at school, his father beats him up, just life generally kicks this kid around, and then on top of that, to add to his woes, he gets kidnapped by this man in a mask who's played by Ethan Hawke. But this turn of events ends up actually being a positive opportunity in disguise for him, because in order to escape from captivity, he has to learn to start standing up for himself. For a film about a kid getting kidnapped, The Black Phone is actually surprisingly charming. It definitely has some darker scenes and elements for sure, including some very tense escape sequences, but in the end, it's actually a strangely upbeat story. It's like the inverse version of Speak No Evil, which is kind of weird coming from the guy who made Sinister, which is a very bleak film. But I guess you just gotta always keep the audience on their toes, you know? And speaking of the guy who made Sinister, Scott Derrickson directed this one, and his grasp on just the art of filmmaking really shows through here. He does a great job of bringing to life this time period of the 70s, and he just gets you invested in the story through really good, solid filmmaking. I really can't wait to see what he does next after this. And speaking of directors I'm excited to see more from, at number 8 is the newest entry on this list, which is brand new in fact. I'm of course talking about Robert Eggers' new Nosferatu remake. Like I said in my recent review, probably the most impressive thing about this movie is just how entirely it swallows you in the time period. I don't know if 1830s Germany has ever felt this real and tangible in a film before. It may play a little too commercial for my taste at times, but that may also be an upside because it will bring in a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily sit through one of Eggers' more indie films like The Witch or The Lighthouse. And it still does carry plenty of that great atmosphere and imagery that you'd expect from a Nosferatu remake. There are some really just mind-blowing shots that will take your breath away. Over time, I think this movie will prove to be one of the better Bram Stoker adaptations out there. At number 7 is Pearl, which is Ti West's prequel to X, which, spoiler alert, will be showing up higher on this list. Pearl may not be as irresistible as its predecessor, but it is still extremely solid. It's a very unique villain origin story where you get all of this colorful, old-fashioned Technicolor imagery, which contrasts nicely with the very dark subject matter, which is nothing less than murder most foul. More than almost anything else, this movie just showcases Mia Goth as an actor. She does some scenes that are just amazing, like this 8-minute long monologue scene that's all delivered in one take, or the audition scene where she finally gets to show her talents as a dancer. Please, I'm a star! Her and Ti West both definitely should have gotten Oscar attention for this one. At number 6 is Mad God. This is from Phil Tippett, the guy who did the creature effects for Star Wars and a lot of other major motion pictures. He's been an effects artist for a long time, but he's never directed before, so this is his debut. And what a debut it is. Mad God is an absolutely insane stop-motion freak show. It takes place in this post-apocalyptic universe where humanity is basically subjected to the whim of various monsters and machines and just general cruelty and nastiness. There isn't a very strong plot here. It's more of just like a showcase for Phil's incredible practical effects. But there are a little bit of story beats that start to emerge towards the end, and some themes that get explored throughout the film in a more visual way that I think are pretty satisfying. If you want something weird, check this one out. And number 5 is Strange Darling. This one is a real windy road. It really pays to go into this one blind because there's just so many insane twists and turns and things that the plot does that you don't expect. Like with Barbarian, I can't say much about it without spoiling it, but it is a very solid thriller and I highly recommend people check it out. And number 4 is Heretic, and out of all the movies on this list, this is probably the most cerebral and dialogue heavy and the least scary. It's not really even a horror film in the most straightforward sense, although there are some very messed up scenes. It is, however, a very good movie. The main appeal to me is the way it explores topics of faith and religion. These are things that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and so I love seeing them getting explored in a pretty fair and honest way in a film. Hugh Grant plays a great charismatic villain here. There's long sequences that are just sustained by him monologuing, and if it was a lesser actor, they would very quickly become, boring and tiresome. But Hugh Grant's charisma just shines through in basically every scene that he's in. The themes and this lead performance both make Heretic worth seeing and one of the best horror-adjacent films of this decade. And number 3 is Bones and All. I just saw this one for the first time in preparation for this list, and to be honest, I didn't expect that much out of it. The reviews were good, but a romantic road trip drama about 2 young cannibals just did not sound like something that was super appealing to me, but I'm so glad that I did see it because it kind of blew me away a little. The best word that I can use to describe this one is just vivid. It has this quality to it that just feels so alive. The way these various Midwest locations are photographed is just breathtaking. And this isn't the kind of cold, distant artistry that you would get from a very pretentious cinematographer. This is something much more real. Almost every scene has this quality to it where I just feel like I'm there with the characters. Through a million little things, these filmmakers just evoke something that feels so alive to me. It really speaks to me. And number 2 is Godzilla Minus One. This is a good old-fashioned human story wrapped up into a good old-fashioned monster movie. And it's very just solid on that level. But I actually think this one goes further than that, to the point that I actually think this is an important movie. I just finally got around to this one recently, so I haven't had time to review it individually. I plan to get around to that in the new year, but for now, I'll just briefly sum up why this movie matters to me so much. The movie follows a World War II Japanese kamikaze pilot who abandoned his duty, and now after the war, he has to basically relearn how to live again. And through his decision to continue living, he saves and affects the lives of countless people around him. It's a very moving film about the value of human life that kind of feels to me like it couldn't have been made in the Western world at this point. Nevertheless, I think it's exactly the movie we need right now, so whether you're in Japan or the West or anywhere else in the world, check out this movie. It really is worth it. But at number 1 is X, and I did not have to think twice about putting this one in this spot. X takes that dirty, grindhouse, exploitative aesthetic from movies like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and basically elevates it a little. And what that means in practice is that it has the kind of creative kills and heavy sexual elements that you'd expect from a slasher movie, but it infuses those things with these existential themes that are very interesting. The way you know it's really good is that it takes quite a while to start getting to the kills, and yet I'm never bored through the first hour of the movie before the knives and the pitchforks come out, because I'm just so sucked in by this cast of colorful characters and this story that's being told. And this is in large part due to the immaculate editing. In an era where films are getting progressively longer and more self-indulgent, the editing in X stands out as a kind of beacon of hope. This thing is all killer, no filler, and it's the best horror film of the decade so far, in my allegedly humble opinion. And that's it for this list. Tell me what your favorites are in the comments, and I'll see you in the next review.